I've always thought that silence is peace. When I was a teenager, silence meant that everything was fine. My mother was at work, my father was in the garage, I was in the room with headphones, the world was immersed in serenity. It was only over time that I realized that silence doesn't always give you freedom. Sometimes it hides things inside that you can't hide from even behind a closed door, especially at night. I didn't move into this house out of love for the neighborhood. To be honest, I just couldn't afford anything better. An old one-story house at the back of a dead-end street, in an area where garbage is not taken out according to schedule, and the neighbors are silent even when someone is shouting nearby. I won't say that I was scared. I've long been used to not waiting for help. It was a rental, cheap, no questions asked. I signed the contract, drove in, put a mattress on the floor, a table, a couple of lamps, and a monitor. Everything I needed to work and survive. The first nights were normal. Creaks, wind, old pipes. When you live alone, you quickly learn to distinguish between sounds, a refrigerator that periodically clicks when the compressor turns on, wood that shrinks under the temperature, a roof over which fallen leaves run. The mind learns to filter out noise. But one day, he started to bring them back. It all started with footsteps. Not loud, not in a hurry. It's just a step, a pause, another step, as if someone is walking on the carpet with bare feet. I heard them at about 3 a.m, at the deadest time of the day, when the city seemed to freeze. The footsteps were almost inaudible, but I didn't make them up. I can distinguish the hum of a heater from a human's gait. They were always the same. It was as if someone had come out of the hallway and walked towards my bedroom, but they never made it to the door. I waited, froze, listened, and nothing. Everything stopped. There was no click of a pen, no knock, just silence, which was more oppressive than any scream. I didn't panic right away. I'm an adult, rational. I checked the windows, locks, doors, and climbed into the attic. Nothing. I even bought a motion sensor camera and put it in the hallway. I've reviewed all the records, but it's empty. There was no movement. Just me, sleeping in a strange position with an anxious half-hint of insomnia on my face. I started going to bed later, not because I wanted to stay awake, but because I didn't want to hear those footsteps. But the later I fell asleep, the stronger the feeling that I was not alone. And this is not mysticism, not energy. It's a purely animal feeling. You know it when you enter an unfamiliar room and you definitely feel that someone has been there recently. Not a smell, not a sound, not a shadow, just a presence. Then the little things started happening. The keys I put on the dresser ended up at the sink the next morning. The phone was on the floor, ready to charge. I started to think that I was just getting tired, confusing things. I work a lot, I hardly leave the house, I lose focus. I didn't want to admit that I didn't have control over where and what I left. But then the steps began with the answer. I wasn't just listening anymore. I started checking. I got up, went out into the corridor, turned on the light, and there was silence. And as soon as I went back and lay down again, I took a step. I got up again, nothing. On the fourth night, I sat down with a cup of coffee on a chair opposite the bedroom door. I just sat there waiting. It was 2:47 on the clock. I remember exactly. At 3:08, I heard them. The first step. I froze. The second one is closer. The third one is almost at the door. I didn't move. I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was there. I yanked the door open. Empty. Not a soul. There was no air. No wind. Nothing. But I felt like I didn't make it. That someone had already left. He didn't disappear, but he was leaving when I opened the door. I didn't sleep at night anymore. I couldn't. I set up the camera, and one night it picked up a sound, not footsteps, but a click, as if fingers were running over the wallpaper. Pause. Click again. And the third one. That's it. I've played the recording dozens of times. I even took out the sound, applied filters, cleaning, compared it with background noises. It wasn't a glitch. I started noticing footprints. Not shoe prints, but dents in the carpet. Heavy, deep, as if someone had been standing there for a long time. The next morning, I took a photo, and then checked again a day later. They were shifted, as if whoever left them had moved a little sideways. I started putting matches in the doors. If someone opens the door, the match will fall. In the morning, I found 2 matches on the floor, one in the kitchen and the other in the bathroom. Both were intact, as if the doors were opening slowly with precision. I didn't tell anyone. Who would have believed it? This is not paranoia. I felt like I was being watched, but not from outside, from inside the house. Things didn't move by themselves, but they were moved. The footsteps didn't sound random. They heard me when I was listening. One day I found a note, a small piece of paper on the back of the receipt. The handwriting was strange, ragged, careless. It read, "You hear footsteps, and I can hear how afraid you are of them." I almost dropped the paper. I do not know who wrote it. I kept it in a drawer, but it disappeared a day later. Instead, there is another piece of paper. "When you sleep, I only move things. When you're awake, I'm wondering if I should move you." From that moment on, I started locking the bedroom door. But even then, the footsteps continued. They didn't reach the door, but they were there, closer. It's like someone is standing behind her, leaning his forehead against a tree. Sometimes I could hear soft breathing, not the wind, present. And then I realized that if I want to survive, I have to figure out who it is. That I didn't know how you could go on living when you were waiting every night for someone to be at the door, or that someone's already inside. Not just in the house, but in your space, in your air, among your things. I checked the locks 10 times. I started putting cups and objects on the floor near the door so that if something moved, I would hear it. And I heard it. A couple of times I woke up from the ringing, as if someone had accidentally touched them when I approached. And again, silence. No creaking, no sound of running footsteps. Simply silence. Pressing. Lively. I decided not just to observe, but to act. I started keeping a diary, not on my phone, but on paper. He recorded every sound, every moment, time, environment, everything that happened, even if it seemed unimportant. At some point, it seemed to me that I no longer lived here. I'm a guest, a constant, unwanted guest in your own home. And they made it clear to me that I'm here temporarily. The strangest thing started when I tried to leave. Just break out of this routine. I packed my bag, turned off the equipment, left the house, and went to a friend's house in a neighboring city. I slept at his place. Conversations, food, warm company, everything seems to be fine. But on the second night, I woke up sweating. The walls of someone else's apartment. Cold. And there are footsteps in my ears. And they weren't dreams. I didn't sleep. I looked into the darkness and heard someone walking on the floor, on the carpet, as if he knew where I was. I even thought, what if it wasn't a house? What if it's something behind me? But then I came back. Everything was the same inside. Dust. Silence. Only one thing has changed. There's paper taped to the refrigerator, right in the middle of the white door. Clean, empty. But I felt that she wasn't random. I took it off and put it in the table. In a couple of hours, the second one. Already with the text. "Did you think you could just leave?" It wasn't paranoia. Someone was in my house, knew where I was, what I was doing when I slept, when I woke up. It was a man. And that was the most frightening thing. Because a person doesn't obey logic. He doesn't explain himself. He does what he sees fit. And you don't know what he's willing to do. I started checking the walls. Not at hiding places, not at cameras. I was looking for traces of life. Where could he be? Where could he live? I listened to the emptiness, knocked. Once I heard a short echo from the wall, in the pantry. I raised my ear and heard a soft, short exhale. Not a rustle. No creaking. Namely, exhale. It was like someone was hiding and couldn't hold their breath when I approached. I stepped back, as if in a dream, and just stood there. I didn't open it. He didn't scream. I just realized that if I open it now, everything will change. I wasn't ready for this. That night, I sat in a chair by the window until dawn. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I just waited, but nothing happened. And that's the scariest part. When you don't know if something is going to happen, or if you're just being kept waiting. A day later, I discovered that the camera in the hallway was turned off. The memory card is removed. I'm sure I left it there. But in its place was a small piece of paper with one line. "Do you want to know who I am? I'm the one who knows what you don't want to know." I couldn't stand it. I called the police. I explained that someone was breaking into my house, moving things, writing notes. They arrived, interviewed, examined the rooms, took a couple photos, and left. Said, "You are alone, the locks are intact, there are no signs of forced entry." Maybe it was nerves. I didn't blame them. Outwardly, everything was clean. A house is like a house. A man is like a man. But they didn't hear footsteps. You didn't live with the feeling that someone was pressing against the walls behind your back. I tried to normalize my life again. Work. To do things. Sleep at least a couple of hours a day. But then I saw that in one of the cupboards at the very back, there was my old shoe. I remember for sure that he was on the balcony. I haven't worn it for a long time, but it was there in the closet. And inside there is a small candy wrapper. Not mine. And it wouldn't have been scary if I hadn't smelled someone else's scent. Sweet. The kind that comes from a body that hasn't washed its clothes for a long time. I sat and looked at the closet. Long. About 10 minutes. And I realized he wasn't just here. He lived here. He didn't come. He didn't sneak. He didn't sneak. He was inside, like a roommate you couldn't see. You just feel it. Later, I found another trail. Under the bathroom. A small metal object. At first, I thought it was just a spare part. But then I realized it was a piece of an old knife. The blade is broken off, and there's a cloth on the handle. Absorbed. And then I realized that he wasn't just watching. He's ready. He leaves the details as labels. He builds his points of control. You can say, eat it. But where to? He's not leaving. He gets attached. He knows I have nowhere to go. And now I know for sure that the footsteps are not an auditory deception. He's the one who's training. Trains his approach. He teaches me to be afraid. I found another note today. It was taped on the inside of the door that I leave in the morning. I haven't opened the door since last night. The paper looked fresh. It said, "When you feel the touch, it will be too late to be afraid." And I'm still sitting there, not moving. I can feel the cold creeping under my skin. Not from the cold, but from awareness. All I heard, all I felt was preparation. He wasn't playing. He waited. And I do not know what I didn't know what to do next. It felt as if the entire space around them had been compressed to a single point, to this note on the inside of the door. I held it in my hand, but my fingers were shaking, as if I had touched something alive. As if someone had just put down the paper itself. I didn't hear or feel how it happened. And it was maddening to realize that a person who could enter your house while you were here and leave a message had long since stopped perceiving boundaries the way we perceive them. I didn't immediately realize what I was doing when I started checking the windows. I went through every room, every window, lock, hinge, even the cracks at the baseboards. I was looking for something that I had never looked for before. Not footprints, not things, but presence. It wasn't physical. It was like a smell that you can't see, but that remains. It's like a look you don't notice, but you can feel it on your skin. And the more I checked, the more I realized how much this man got used to the space. He didn't just know the house. He was at home in it. At first, I wanted to escape. Open the door, run out, don't turn around. But something stopped me. Not fear, but the certainty that it won't help. He's not tied to a place. He's attached to me. And as terrible as it sounds, I'm part of his plan now. I am a target, an object, perhaps an experiment. But not medically, not psychologically. Social. He studied how far a person can go without breaking the laws, without leaving evidence, without showing aggression directly, but causing destruction in another way. Complete, methodical, permanent. The next morning, I woke up to a sound. Not loud. Very subtle. It was as if a fingernail had been drawn across the inside of the glass. Once. And everything. I froze. Was listening. Nothing. But the sound was so clear that I stood up. He went to the window. The usual kind. Street. Cars. People. But there's a stone inside. The unbearable feeling that I'm not alone. I closed all the curtains. That's it. The house became as dark as a box. I couldn't see the street anymore. I didn't want to be visible. 2 days later, I started noticing that someone was eating in the fridge. Quite a bit. Half of the yogurt. A few slices of sausage. Something that you might not notice if you're not watching. But I started measuring everything. Bottled water. The sugar level in the sugar bowl. The position of the spoons. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. I couldn't imagine how anyone could get into the house without leaving a trace. But it was happening. And then one day, late at night, I heard a closet creak. I didn't move. I lay covered with a blanket and just listened. The creaking was not loud, but it was closer than usual. In the room, I slowly reached for the phone, started recording, but then I heard something else, a breath. Not mine. I held my breath, and that was a mistake. Because in the silence, that breath sounded like a hoarse, long sound, as if a person standing a few meters away suddenly remembered to breathe. I do not know how long I lay there without moving. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. I didn't hear him come out. I didn't hear any footsteps. But in the morning, when the sun lit up the room a little, I realized that there was a piece of paper on the floor next to the bed. Plain white, with a new line. You're getting closer to understanding, but won't be good for you. I started to wonder, who is it? Why is he doing this? Why me? But the worst part is that part of me got used to it. This is not normal, but the brain adapts. I began to perceive him as a constant presence, as a neighbor, as a tenant who is not visible, but who is somewhere nearby, who is watching. I put the recorder in the closet. I left it overnight. I listened to it in the morning. Almost an hour of silence. Then a short sound, the rustle of clothes. 10 minutes later, a phrase. Quiet, barely discernible. Why are you trying to hear if you don't want to know? It was said calmly, assuredly. No rage, no fear. I was sitting with a dictaphone in my hand, and I felt like everything was shrinking inside me. Someone was whispering next to my things in my house, and doing it as if it were his house. After that, I removed all the cameras. Everything that records. It didn't make sense. I realized that he didn't mind me knowing. He's even interested in that. He wants me to feel. He wants me to live in it, so that I would not just be afraid, but think about him every second. In the evening, I saw another note, under the glass of a microwave. I do not know when he put it there. There was, do you think this is all the beginning? What if he just didn't notice how it had already ended? I haven't slept in 2 days. My eyes were burning, and my hands were shaking, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave my house, my things, or myself. He was already a part of everything. And the most frightening thing is not that he's here. The thing is, I do not know when he started being here. Maybe it all started long before the first steps. Maybe he was always there, just hadn't made himself felt before. And now I've decided it's time to get to know each other better. I started to wonder from what point everything went wrong. Where was the turning point after which I stopped being alone in my own house? Not in terms of someone's presence, but psychologically. When I stopped feeling safe as something normal. I tried to remember the first few weeks after moving in, wondering if there wasn't something strange back then. Maybe I just didn't notice. Maybe I was too busy unpacking boxes, connecting the internet, working. Maybe he was already walking around the house while I was sleeping, and just didn't leave any traces. And, that's what started to drive me crazy. The thought that he's been around for a long time. He just used to play differently. I started carrying a dictaphone with me, even to the bathroom. I recorded sounds in the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the kitchen. Sometimes at night, when I listened to these recordings, I found myself sitting in complete silence, listening to the breathing in the background. And I didn't know if it was mine. On one of the recordings, I heard the dishwasher open at 3:17 at night. At first, there was a click, as if the door had been slightly pulled. Then there was a soft thud, as if something had been put inside. I was asleep at the time. I'm sure I would have woken up if someone had been walking through the kitchen. But there was a recording, and there was sound. I went to check. There's nothing special inside. There's only one cup that I definitely didn't put there. The following week, I started writing a list. What I put where, at what time, in what condition. It turned into an obsession. I recorded how compressed the toothpaste tube was, the position of the keys on the shelf, and even how turned on the bathroom faucet was. Not because I wanted to catch him, but because I wanted to make sure that I still owned something in this space. One day, when I woke up in the morning, I found that my t-shirt was hanging out of place. It always hangs on the left hook of the closet. In the morning, she was on the right. I might have thought that I had made a mistake myself, but it was fastened with one button, which I never fastened. Never. I didn't even know she was there. It wasn't just fear. It was a pervasive anxiety that did not leave even in public places. I began to notice that someone was following me around the store. Not close, but in sight. Someone who doesn't do anything suspicious, but is always there. I went into the coffee shop, and he was already there, drinking something by the window. I went out to the pharmacy, and a minute later, I heard the door open behind me again. And one day, I saw a man I had already seen in several places walk past me in the park. I stopped turned around and walked the other way. 10 minutes later, he passed by again. He didn't look at me. He just passed through, as if he'd said, "I can be anywhere and you won't do anything." I returned home in the evening and decided not to turn on the light. I just sat in the kitchen and waited. Nothing was happening. I sat there for almost 2 hours. He was silent. He was breathing. He peered into the darkness. And suddenly I heard a soft sound somewhere from the depths of the apartment. A drop of water fell into the bathroom sink. No more sound. I walked there slowly, step by step, in complete silence. I didn't turn on the light. I just walked to the bathroom. He stood in the doorway. I'm looking. Silence. The sink is dry. Not a single drop. When I returned to the kitchen, there was a piece of paper on the table. Plain paper. Written in black pen, neat handwriting. "You're looking into the dark, hoping to see me. But all this time you had to look at yourself." I do not know what he meant by that, but I realized one thing for sure. He's not just watching anymore. He plays. He's creating a script in which I'm the main character. He's like a director, but everything happens in reality. He doesn't break down doors. He doesn't steal things. He changes the small to destroy the big. Inside, in my head, in life, I stopped inviting friends to visit. I stopped calling anyone, because I was afraid that he would start coming to them. And then it won't be my paranoia, but their reality. I couldn't let that happen. It's better to burn alone than to drag others into something that has no name. Sometimes at night, I think I hear someone walking on the carpet in the living room. But there are no footsteps, only the muffled sound of weight shifting. Easy. Sure. It's like he knows where the creak is and avoids them. Sometimes I lie with my eyes open and just count my breaths. Not to calm down, and to make sure that there are 2 of them. Otherwise, it will seem to me that someone is breathing nearby. At some point, I realized that I had started listening to sounds not out of fear, but out of habit. I stopped hoping that the morning would come, and it would get easier. Light no longer meant safety. He just made everything clearer. In the dark, there was at least some space for doubt, for the fantasy that maybe it was all just my imagination. But during the day, I saw things that couldn't be explained. For example, a small scratch appeared on the wall in the hallway. I didn't pay attention. You never know. I touched something. But the next day it got a little longer, then deeper. And one morning I saw a thin line of dust coming from it, as if someone had run a fingernail over it. I didn't touch her. He just stared and slowly stepped back, not looking away. I no longer tried to pretend that this was not happening. I just lived in it. No complaints. Without a fight. It was like resigned. I resigned myself until I saw something that completely destroyed all boundaries. It was a recording from a camera that I had discreetly installed in the bedroom. I checked on her every morning, more out of inertia than with any hope of seeing anything. But that day, I clicked play, and my heart skipped a beat. The video showed me sleeping. Everything is quiet and static. Until one moment. Until 3:42. Then, without turning on the lights, I appear in the frame. I get up, open closet, take out a box that wasn't there. I sit on the edge of the bed and lower my head. I've been sitting like this for almost 3 minutes. Then I get up, put the box back, and go to bed. I stared at it without blinking. I didn't remember anything like that. No box, no waking up. I rewound it. I looked again. The same movements. The same seconds. Everything is mechanical, precise, and without hesitation. I got up and went to the closet. He took out the box. An ordinary cardboard shoebox. It's not closed. Inside is a bunch of keys, a stack of old photos, a driver's license with a name I didn't know, and a piece of paper. There's an address on it. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? And say what? That I found things of unknown origin after I recorded myself wandering around the apartment with no memory? I just sat there and stared into the box. About 15 minutes. Without thoughts. Without feelings. And only then did I notice that one of the photos was my balcony. Taken from below, from afar at night. My curtains, my lamp, and there's a silhouette in the doorway. Human, not me, not now. Then, when I first moved in, before all this, that was the proof. I wasn't alone from the very beginning. I do not know how much time passed after that. A few hours, maybe a day. I turned off the phone. I closed all the windows, and just sat there, was listening. I listened to every sound. and all I could hear was my footsteps. Because as it turned out, he was inside me. Or more precisely, he became me. I'm not talking about a split personality or anything clinical. No. I mean, when I was trying to figure out someone else's behavior, adjust to it, guess, predict, that's exactly what I started doing. I started moving just like him. Open doors the same way he does. Breathe the same way he does. I recorded myself every night, and more often I saw myself doing what he would do. It's like I'm just continuing his work now. Unknowingly, automatically, systematically. I no longer knew where I ended and where he began. In the last video I decided to watch, I'm lying on the bed. Sleep. The camera is writing. And suddenly, at some point, I open my eyes right into the lens. Not abruptly, calmly, quietly. I'm looking. A few seconds. Then I get up. I walk up to the camera. And before she turns off, I smile. I don't remember that, but I have no doubt that it was me. Since then, I haven't turned on the recordings anymore. I don't check where things are anymore. I don't mark where I put my keys. Everything has lost its meaning. Because if you become what you were afraid of, then there is nowhere to run. There's no one to defend against. There's no one to fight. He doesn't go out at night anymore. Because he doesn't need it anymore. Now I do everything myself. Effortlessly. Without fear. Without a doubt. I am the night steps. And maybe you're the next one to hear them.